Can you believe that what was supposed to be a dinner of reconciliation turned into a nightmare? One late autumn afternoon, I received a call from my son, Victor, and his wife, Clara, inviting me to dinner. My heart was racing with excitement because this was the very thing I had longed for after so many years of silence, cold wars, and avoiding each other's faces. I truly believed that this time we would reconcile, laugh together, and finally be a real family again. But the moment I stepped into their house, my joy was quickly overshadowed by a strange, uneasy feeling. Then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from an unknown number appeared. "Stand up and leave immediately. You are in danger." My instincts urged me to listen, and that decision led me straight into a chilling truth. Just 30 minutes later, the police stormed in, sealing off the house, and the dark secrets began to unravel. You won't believe what they had done, or what happened next. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and comment below to let me know where you're listening from. The dish soap bubbles clung stubbornly to my weathered hands as I scrubbed Helen's favorite coffee mug for the third time this week. Same routine every evening. I turned the cup slowly in my hand, letting the overhead light catch on the faint scratches near its rim. My finger lingered there, trembling slightly, tracing the tiny crack as though I were touching an old memory that time itself had tried to erase. One plate, one fork, one cup. That was dinner now. The kitchen echoed with silence, vast and hollow without Helen's humming or her gentle scolding about leaving newspapers scattered on the table. On the refrigerator, mismatched magnets held faded photographs. My eyes settled on one, in particular Victor at his high school graduation. In the picture, he grinned wide. The future stretched out before him like an open road. I brushed my fingertip lightly over his face through the glass. A sharp ache welled inside me. How could a smile once so full of promise turn into years of cold silence? The shrill ring of the phone shattered the stillness. I jolted, dropping the dish towel in my hand. It landed on the floor with a damp splat, spreading a dark stain across the tiles as my heart pounded wildly as though it might break free from my chest. When I saw the name on the screen, Victor, my eyes widened. My hand clutched the back of the chair for balance. For a moment the whole room seemed to spin. All sound vanished, leaving only the deafening drumbeat of my own heart and that single name glowing back at me. I pressed the receiver to my ear. On the other end, there was only Victor's uneven breathing, fast and hesitant. In that sound, I heard an echo of the boy he once was, the child who used to slip into our room at night, afraid of the dark, seeking the comfort of safety. But now, between us stood a chasm carved deep by silence, pride, and money. "Dad," he began at last, voice tight, uncertain. I think it's time we had dinner together. Clara and I would like you to come over tonight." I gripped the receiver harder, a storm of doubt and fragile hope rising inside me. A simple dinner invitation, but beneath it lay the weight of everything we had lost. This could be the chance to mend what was broken, or the moment it shattered forever. My gaze drifted toward the family photo on the table. I picked it up, running my thumb over Helen's gentle smile, as though I could draw strength from it. Her eyes seemed to urge me forward, to choose forgiveness over fear. "Yes," I whispered at last, though my hand still trembled. "I'll be there. Tonight would be different. Tonight, I'd have my son back." Upstairs, my bedroom felt like a museum of memories, silent, still, untouched. The old wardrobe creaked as I opened it, the hinges protesting like tired bones. My fingers paused on the thin plastic cover draped over my old suit, trembling as though afraid of waking a memory that had been sleeping too long. When I pulled the hanger free, the scent of aged wood and worn fabric spilled out, wrapping me in the ghost of another time, those years when Helen still stood beside me. I laid the suit carefully on the bed. My chest tightened as my mind drifted back to Victor's graduation. I could see it as if it were yesterday, my son stepping onto the stage, pride swelling in my chest until it felt ready to burst. Helen had squeezed my hand, her eyes brimming with tears of joy. That same pride still clung to the fibers of this suit, every thread holding echoes of that moment when the future looked so bright. I showered slowly, letting the hot water pound against my skin. It felt as though the years of dust and sorrow were being rinsed away, peeling back layers to reveal a man still capable of hope. The razor slid across my jaw, leaving faint stings behind, each one a reminder that I was still alive, still meant to keep moving forward. When I dressed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. A weary old man stared back at me, eyes clouded with exhaustion yet burning faintly with longing. I tugged at the tie, adjusted the collar, tried to make myself presentable, but the hollowness in my gaze betrayed me. No amount of fabric could conceal the absence of laughter that had long left these walls. On the shelf by the window sat a row of dusty bottles. My hand drifted across them until it rested on a long-forgotten bottle of aged whiskey. I wiped the dust away with my sleeve and held it close, as though it were a fragile peace offering. Perhaps it could serve as a silent apology to Victor, a gesture to bridge the years that had kept us apart. Just then, my phone buzzed. A new message. 247 Elmwood Drive, Montclair. My heart tightened. That address alone carried the weight of a revelation. Montclair was a world apart from the modest life I knew, a place of glass facades and marble halls. Somehow, my son had crossed into that life of wealth and grandeur. A pang of unease ran through me, but mingled with it was a flicker of hope. Maybe within those walls, reconciliation could finally take root. I called for a car and waited by the window. Outside, Brooklyn spread before me in its familiar patchwork of glowing windows and muffled laughter. Children's voices rang from a neighbor's yard, sharp with joy. I drew in a deep breath, steadying myself. I was leaving behind the last place I felt safe, stepping into uncertainty not for myself but for the chance of family. As I stepped outside, Mrs. Chen from next door waved, one hand gripping a bag of fresh vegetables. I returned the gesture with a tired smile. That small, ordinary exchange struck me deeply, reminding me that some bonds required no money or success, only presence and care. The car pulled up to the curb. With the whiskey bottle in hand, and my heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation, I climbed in. Montclair awaited. Maybe, just maybe, family really could find its way home. The Uber slowed to a stop before a house that seemed to rise out of another world entirely. I sat stiffly in the back seat, my hand clutching the strap of the seat as if it could anchor me to reality. The mansion loomed ahead, glowing in the twilight like a dream someone else had earned, not my son. The door clicked open, and a cool breeze touched my face. Still, sweat clung to my palms. When my worn shoes, polished though they were, hit the marble driveway, they made a hollow clacking sound, like an intruder's echo in a world where I didn't belong. At the front steps stood Lucia, the housekeeper. She bowed her head respectfully, but her eyes, just for an instant, carried a flicker of sadness and warning. It wasn't the glance of a woman doing her job, it was the glance of someone who had seen too much and dared not speak. Inside, the foyer stretched wide and gleaming, making my Brooklyn apartment feel no larger than a matchbox. Every step I took reverberated in the cavernous hall, as if I had stepped into a museum where everything was too perfect to touch. Then Victor appeared, his smile broad, his arms spreading in welcome. His embrace was warm, but not the joy of reunion. It felt more like the grip of someone afraid of losing something. Against my chest, I could feel his heart racing, not only from emotion but from tension he tried to hide. Clara emerged a moment later, radiant like she had stepped out of a magazine spread. Every detail was arranged. The flawless silk dress without a wrinkle, the perfectly painted lips, the perfume that hung in the air like a claim of wealth. Yet in her eyes, the warmth was staged, an actress playing her part too well. Victor guided me further inside, gesturing broadly toward the towering ceilings and polished woodwork. Real estate is good to me these days, he laughed, the sound too quick, too rehearsed. His hand tugged slightly at the edge of his jacket, an old tell of his since childhood whenever he faced a question he couldn't quite answer. I presented the bottle of whiskey with both hands, as though offering a sacred relic. Victor's face lit up as he accepted it, but there was something in his gleaming eyes that unsettled me, the delight of a man who had just found the missing piece to a secret plan. Clara's voice chimed in, smooth as glass. "And I made your favorite stew, just like Helen used to." Her words froze me in place. How could she know? That memory belonged to my family alone. Her smile widened, concealing something I couldn't yet name. "Come, Dad," Victor said, his stride long and confident, though his shoulders held a faint stiffness. I followed, feeling less like a guest and more like an actor stepping onto a grand stage. The table was set, the lights cast warm shadows, and each player seemed to know their lines. Only I walked into the scene without a script. Lucia had vanished somewhere into the house's depths, leaving us in this perfect tableau of family reunion. The dining room opened before us like something from a period drama, every surface gleaming, every angle carefully staged. The polished wood and the fragrance of fresh flowers mingled in the air, creating a refined atmosphere so perfect that I felt I had to breathe softer, lest I disturb it. "A beauty that feels both breathtaking and foreign," I murmured, as though I'd stepped into someone else's life. Victor uncorked the whiskey with a quiet pop, the sound sharp in the silence. He poured the amber liquid into crystal glasses, the chandelier's light catching the surface until it looked like tiny flames flickering in each cup. Clara lifted her glass with a practiced grace, her gesture so flawless it seemed rehearsed many times before. Her dazzling smile was a mask, concealing whatever lurked behind it. I took a sip. The whiskey spread warmly, leaving a sweet burn in my throat, but with it came an odd sensation, lightheadedness, faint, as if something invisible brushed against the edges of my mind. "So," Clara said, tilting her head ever so slightly, her eyes fastening on me as though every word mattered more than casual conversation. "How is retirement treating you?" Her voice was gentle, but beneath it, a hidden blade glinted. She wasn't only asking, she was probing, measuring, as if she wanted to map my future for me. Victor, quick as ever, refilled my glass with uncanny precision, as though he'd been tracking each drop I swallowed. He laughed, too light, too easy, watching closely as I drank again. Lucia entered quietly, placing bowls of soup before us. Her hand trembled just enough that the spoon clinked against the porcelain, a small, sharp sound in the hush of the room. I looked up and caught her eyes for a second. She looked away at once, as if afraid of what I might see. Clara leaned forward, her curiosity sharpened into something that felt less like warmth and more like interrogation wrapped in silk. "And what about your plans?" she asked smoothly. "Do you think about what comes next, for the family?" Then came the stew. Its aroma stopped me cold. It was uncanny, each layer of spice, each familiar note was exactly as Helen had made it years ago in our own kitchen. My breath caught. How could Clara know? The dish was a memory, private and intimate, resurrected here like a scene studied and reproduced with surgical precision. I looked at her, and her smile widened, suddenly alien, like a mask fitted too tightly to hide the truth. My head grew heavier, not in the dull weight of drink, but in a strange, fragile way, like the boundary between waking and dream was thinning, smudging until I no longer knew which side I stood on. Across the table, Victor and Clara locked eyes. They needed no words. It was the look of actors perfectly in sync with their script, waiting for the lead character me to follow the path they had already written. Everything felt slightly surreal, like watching myself from outside my body. My phone vibrated against my palm so violently it felt alive, its frantic pulse syncing with my heartbeat until I nearly dropped it onto the table. Strange numbers glowed on the screen, brighter than they should have, forcing my attention as if someone, somewhere, was staring back through those digits. I swiped the screen. The message screamed in block capitals, "Leave now. Don't say anything to your son." A chill tore through me. It wasn't just fear, it was as if someone had flung open an icy door inside my chest, letting frozen air pour straight into my lungs. Clara's voice cut in, sharp but muffled, as though I were hearing her from behind thick glass. "Edward, are you all right?" Her smile held steady, but at the edges of her lips, a flicker of unease betrayed her. I pushed my chair back. The room tilted. I forced myself upright, the floor swaying like a ship deck beneath my shoes. Each step was deliberate, my heels pressing soundlessly into the rug, as if I were an actor leaving the stage but determined to play the part until the final second. The hallway stretched before me. Light spilled from the wall lamps, casting shadows over the portraits hung in perfect symmetry. For a heartbeat, I could swear the painted eyes followed me, unblinking, accusing. In the kitchen, Lucia stood at the sink. She didn't turn, but her shoulders stiffened, lifting almost imperceptibly, as if she already sensed me there. The clinking of glassware rang out thin, metallic, unnatural, echoing in the sterile air scented of detergent and polished steel. The back door opened with a hush, and night air swept over me in a sudden rush. Damp grass, earth, the wild scent of freedom. My heart pounded as the motion sensor lights flared to life, spotlighting each step as though marking the path for a fugitive. At the garden gate, the old iron hinge betrayed me with a shrill creak, tearing through the silence. I froze, breath caught, terrified the noise would summon someone from the house. But nothing stirred. I slipped out onto the street. The phone's glow returned, stark in the darkness. This was no longer just a device to summon a ride, it felt like a summons from fate itself, both lifeline and curse. My thumb hovered, trembling, then pressed the button for an Uber. Minutes later, tucked into the back seat of a stranger's car, I called the number back. A man's voice answered in a rush, low, urgent. "Edward, you're in danger. Victor owes over $2.3 million to men you don't want to know. He and Clara are planning to drug you tonight. Take everything you have. You need to stay away." I closed my eyes. Helen's steady voice echoed in my memory. "Trust your instincts. Not every smile is your friend. Not every family is your refuge." Her practical wisdom was now the only anchor I had. The Uber driver glanced in his rearview mirror, and I sank into the cold leather seat pressing against my back. It felt like a tombstone freshly carved with my name. Headlights from cars behind me flashed across the window, illuminating my pale reflection in a stuttering sequence of light and shadow. The driver's knuckles tightened around the steering wheel, veins rising as if under strain. He flicked his eyes toward the mirror again, quick and searching. For a split second, I wondered, did he hear enough of the conversation to know what kind of man he was driving? A father about to lose everything. The voice on the phone lowered. "Edward, your son has crossed a line. Victor owes $2.3 million to men who will not forgive. He's desperate. Tonight wasn't a family dinner. It was a setup." My mind spun. Numbers danced, sharp and merciless, $2.3 million slicing into me like a blade. A father can imagine his son wasting money, even chasing foolish dreams. But gambling his soul away to that extent, that wasn't just recklessness. It was a plunge into the abyss. Then came the word that made my stomach turn. Zetrulum. That's the drug. In small doses, it makes you confused, compliant, ready to sign anything put in front of you. The name rang like a sentence passed down in a courtroom. My body remembered before my mind did the sudden dizziness at the table, the cold sweat along my neck, and Victor's smile, the one I had naively mistaken for joy at being with his father. All the pieces snapped together. Victor's unusual eagerness to refill my glass, Clara's eyes fixed on every sip I took, and Lucia's silence in the kitchen. I hadn't been the honored guest at dinner. I'd been the prey in a trap designed with care and cruelty. And then, as if scales fell from my eyes, the truth revealed itself. Lucia. The careful woman who polished glasses with almost ritual precision, who avoided every direct glance. She wasn't complicit, she was the one who had risked everything to warn me. My chest tightened, torn between gratitude and grief, for the fear she must have carried alone. Outside, the streets of Montclair unfurled in polished perfection, white fences, immaculate lawns, glowing windows. Yet beneath the painted picture of suburban bliss lay rot and secrets, ready to devour anyone too blind to see. A memory struck me like a hammer. Victor, as a child, clutching a worn teddy bear, begging me to read the same bedtime story 3 times in a row, his small hands wrapped around mine in unshakable trust. How had that boy grown into the man plotting to drug his own father for a signature? The Uber pressed farther into the night. With every mile, I left Montclair behind, yet I also drifted farther from the son I thought I knew. My heart felt both freed and bleeding, each beat counting down the 11 days before Victor's debt of $2.3 million came due. 11 days until the darkness came collecting. The call ended, leaving me alone with the Uber driver's soft jazz murmuring from the speakers. My phone vibrated in my palm, a message from Victor. I stared at the words on the screen, my finger trembling as it traced each letter, as though they were searing themselves into my skin. The rage and the heartbreak tangled together until my hand nearly crushed the phone. Then, with a single decisive swipe, I erased the message, as if erasing the son I once thought I knew. "Still heading to Brooklyn?" the driver asked, his voice casual, unaware of the war raging inside me. For a brief moment, I pictured myself back in Brooklyn, sinking into the old armchair, flipping through the worn wedding album with Helen's smile frozen in time. Safety, quiet, cowardice. But then the vision shifted, Victor and Clara laughing as they torched documents, raising glasses over my ruin. The bile rose in my throat. I pulled from my jacket a photograph, its edges frayed with time. My fingertip traced Helen's smile. In my mind, her voice whispered, firm and gentle, "Never turn your back on the truth, no matter how much it hurts." With shaking hands, I dialed 911. "My family is trying to poison me for money," I blurted. The words hung heavy in the confined air of the car, like a confession of madness. Even I struggled to believe how it sounded aloud. Would the police think I'd lost my mind? But I had evidence, and desperation leaves no room for silence. The operator's calm questions steadied me just enough to relay the address, the names, the timeline. When the call ended, I leaned back, heart pounding. A red traffic light bled its glow across the window, flickering like a warning. The path I'd chosen offered no return. The driver stole a glance at me in the mirror, his brow furrowing as though doubting every word. He nodded faintly, yet the unease in his eyes betrayed him. My grip tightened around Helen's photograph. Whether he believed me or not didn't matter. Montclair awaited, and with it, the truth. Sometimes you have to choose between being safe and doing what's right. The return journey felt different. The soft hum of the car carried me through Montclair's streets, but my chest was tight, my breath shallow. The golden streetlights stretched into long blades across the car window, slicing coldly into the bundle of unease locked inside my chest. Every flicker of light was a reminder I was driving straight back into the lion's den. When the car stopped, I stepped onto the gravel drive. The mansion loomed ahead, shadows curling along its edges like claws. My hand hesitated at the doorbell, fingers trembling, then pressed down harder than necessary, as though only that sound could pierce the thick wall of lies waiting on the other side. The door opened to Victor. Relief flickered briefly across his features, but it was a brittle mask, one that cracked around the edges. His eyes kept darting toward the street, restless, like a man afraid that the truth might arrive in the flashing lights of a police cruiser. "Dad," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Clara appeared moments later, gliding forward with practiced grace, but when her hand found mine, it was cold, damp with sweat. She gripped me too tightly, as if guiding, controlling, not comforting. "We were worried," she murmured, her voice sweet, but brittle as glass. Inside, the dining room had been rearranged with hurried hands. The tablecloth bore fresh folds, too sharp, too new. A patch on the carpet smelled sharply of bleach, where a spill of wine had been scrubbed away in haste. The scent stung my nose, mingling with the metallic taste of fear rising in my throat. Victor gestured toward the table, his tone smooth, too smooth. "How are you feeling now, Dad?" He tilted his head slightly, voice syrupy like a doctor coaxing a nervous patient, yet his gaze measured me clinically, calculating how much longer I might remain seated in that chair. Clara added quickly, "Next time we'll make a lighter meal, something easier." The words slipped from her lips with a false promise, dripping sugar over poison. That next time was nothing but a mirage, a future none of us truly believed would come. Lucia entered quietly, carrying a tray of water. She placed the glass before me, her hand steady but her eyes flashing for the briefest instant toward mine. In that single glance lay a warning, silent, urgent. "Be careful. They've prepared something already." I wrapped my fingers around the cool glass but didn't drink. Instead, I leaned back, feeling the weight of the moment pressing inward from all sides. The air seemed to pulse with tension. My heartbeat merged with the ticking of the wall clock, each second a drumbeat of fate. The evening was building toward a crescendo. "I think Helen would be heartbroken," I said softly, letting my words hang in the air. My tone carried the warmth of a man reminiscing about family, but each syllable pierced deeper into the brittle calm surrounding Victor and Clara. Victor stood abruptly and moved toward the liquor cabinet. His hand trembled as he poured, a few drops spilling over the rim, sliding down the crystal stem and staining the polished wood beneath. He quickly wiped it away, but the quiver in his hand betrayed the storm raging inside him. I lifted my glass and studied it under the chandelier's glow. The amber liquid wasn't as pure as it should have been. Tiny motes floated downward like ash, gathering at the bottom. In contrast, Victor's glass shimmered, clear and perfect, too perfect. Clara approached me with forced tenderness, resting her hand on my shoulder. At first her touch mimicked comfort, but her nails dug deeper, biting through my shirt. Desperation leaked through every press of her fingertips, as though she could will me into submission. I kept my voice steady, recalling the night Helen gave birth. I remember holding her hand, terrified but overjoyed when Victor first came into this world. My words seemed harmless, gentle, but I saw the way they chipped away at Victor's mask, each memory exposing more of his unease. The silence in the room thickened. Even the faint clink of Lucia's spoon against a dish in the kitchen rang sharp, metallic, like a blade against steel. Victor shot Clara a look, panic flickered in both their eyes. I swallowed a smile. The trap they had woven was closing, but not around me. Then it came. 3 thunderous knocks pounded the air, echoing down the marble hallway. "Police! Open up!" The command cracked like thunder. Victor froze, his grip faltering. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered against the stone floor, crystal shards scattering like fragments of a broken future. Uniformed officers surged inside. One seized the tainted glass with gloved precision, tilting it beneath the chandelier. The strange residue glimmered like damning evidence mocking its creator. "Victor Miller, you are under arrest for attempted poisoning, conspiracy to defraud, and elder abuse," the officer declared. His voice struck the air like a judge's gavel, final and unyielding. Victor's face drained of all color. No, this is a setup. Someone's framing me." His words broke apart, high and frantic, as if a string had snapped inside him. He collapsed to his knees, the chains biting his wrists as he gasped, "They'll kill me. You don't understand. I only had 11 days. Clara lunged forward, clutching at my arm, her nails drawing sharp crescents into my skin. "Father, please, tell them it's a mistake. We never meant to hurt you." But her trembling voice betrayed her guilt, and when the officers displayed a folder thick with evidence, her eyes widened with naked fear. Victor twisted as they hauled him away, eyes torn between regret and bitterness. "Father, how could you betray your own blood?" I met his gaze, steady and cold. "I didn't betray this family, Victor. You did." My words closed the ledger of his crimes with finality. Outside, red and blue lights spun across the marble walls, painting the mansion in hues of guilt and punishment. Sirens wailed into the night, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt as though even the house itself sighed in relief after the storm. Victor stood frozen, his face the color of old parchment, lips trembling as the handcuffs clicked into place. His body sagged under the weight of truth and consequence. Suddenly, his voice cracked into a hoarse wail. "They'll kill me! You don't understand! I owe them everything. I only had 11 days left." His words poured out in broken gasps, like a drowning man clawing for air. The officers yanked him upright, but his legs buckled, dragging across the marble floor as his confession echoed through the silent room. Clara recoiled in panic, her chair toppling loudly behind her. "No, I had nothing to do with this. I only followed Victor's orders. He forced me," she screamed, her eyes darting wildly between the officers and Edward, as though searching for one last strand of mercy. But her trembling hands, the deep crescents of her nails still marked into Edward's shoulder, betrayed the truth more loudly than her words ever could. Detective Coleman stepped forward, his gaze sharp and unyielding. "Enough. The evidence is clear. Both of you conspired, and both of you will answer for it." His tone brooked no argument, slicing through Clara's protests. Edward stood motionless, the scene burning into his soul. His own son, his blood reduced to a desperate criminal, and the woman once welcomed as family now revealed as an accomplice. Bitterness rose in his throat, heavy and metallic, but he swallowed it down, his silence colder than any judgment. Lucia lingered in the doorway, her face shadowed by grief and relief alike. She said nothing, only folded her hands together, bearing witness as justice finally broke the poisonous silence that had haunted the house. The officers led Victor and Clara out into the night, their pleas and denials dissolved beneath the shrill wail of sirens. Blue and red lights painted the expensive walls in colors of consequence as the police vehicles disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a mansion that no longer felt like home but like the aftermath of war. The Montclair police station blazed with fluorescent light, phones ringing off the hook as officers moved briskly through cold tile hallways. The air was thick with the bitter smell of strong coffee and the sharp tang of human tension, turning the building into a pressure cooker ready to explode. Through the reinforced glass, I saw Victor pacing like a caged animal. Each heavy step cracked against the floor, the sound echoing hollow and merciless. His hands trembled as he tugged violently at the metal cuffs, as if sheer desperation could break steel. His eyes darted toward me, flashing with hatred one moment, collapsing into childlike pleading the next. Detective Coleman entered the interrogation room with a deliberate calm. He tapped his fingers rhythmically on the metal table, then slammed his coffee mug down with a resonant clang, like a gavel announcing judgment. His eyes bored into me as though peeling back every hidden memory. From the women's holding area, Clara's sobs cut through the night. At first they were muffled, trapped in her throat, then burst forth in ragged cries like a wounded bird thrashing helplessly. Over and over she wailed, "It was all Victor's fault. I was just so afraid." When the sentencing estimate was delivered, my heart clenched as if in a vice. 15 to 20 years, each number fell like nails hammered into a coffin. The room fell silent, save for the relentless scratching of a clerk's pen, etching my son's fate into permanence. Through the fogged glass I watched Victor collapse into the narrow steel chair, his hands covering his face. His shoulders shook violently, and I couldn't tell whether it was fear of prison or the shock of finally confronting the consequences he had spent his life outrunning. Then, suddenly, he erupted. "Dad!" Victor slammed his palms against the glass with a thunderous crack, his eyes bloodshot, streaming with tears. His voice tore from his throat, torn between rage and begging. "I'll give it all back. I swear I'll change. Just help me this once." Detective Coleman leaned closer, his voice heavy with years of weary experience. "This is textbook," he muttered. "I've seen families shattered by greed and manipulation. Don't be fooled, Mr. Miller. The way he calls to you, he'll keep twisting, keep pulling at your heart until you break. Adult children make their own choices." I sat in silence, my hands clenched on my knees, knowing that this time I couldn't save him. "Detective, I need to ask you something important," I said, my voice lower than usual, as though the weight of the question pressed down on my chest. The station carried a suffocating heaviness. The smell of stale coffee mingled with sweat, while the scratch of pens on paper joined the uneven clatter of keyboards. It all blended into a dark symphony of justice, exposing truth without mercy. From the glass partition, Clara appeared, pressing her manicured hands against it. The red polish on her nails was chipped, leaving jagged white streaks across the surface. Her face paint was streaked and broken, transforming her once carefully crafted beauty into something grotesque, a mask crumbling under the strain of reality. Her voice cracked as she begged, "Edward, please, don't let them do this to us." But her pleas slid off me like rain against stone. My mind drifted back to that night, to the anonymous call. I could still hear the quick, shallow breaths, the tremor in the voice, as though someone was terrified of being overheard. That fragile, hurried voice had pulled me back from the edge of death, a thin thread yanking me away from disaster. For weeks, the identity of my rescuer was cloaked in shadow. Later, as the long hours bled into night, a young officer approached me with a ring of keys. "Ready to head home, Mr. Miller?" he asked. His grip was firm, his nod steady. For the first time in years, I felt something in that question beyond procedure. I felt respect, a rare recognition that I was not just a case file but a man who had fought and reclaimed his dignity. When my phone finally rang, it buzzed twice before I answered. A familiar voice came through, no longer shaky or hidden but strong, steady, and laced with kindness. "I am Lucia." Those 4 words froze me. The veil of secrecy fell away, revealing the true face of loyalty and moral courage. She explained how, while cleaning Victor's office, she had overheard everything, the schemes, the lies, the danger. She had risked everything to act, choosing to save a man she could have easily ignored. Sitting in the police station's lobby near midnight, I broke down in tears. They spilled freely, darkening the rough skin of my hands. My sobs echoed through the near-empty hall, not as cries of despair, but as a release. For the first time since Helen's funeral, my tears carried something else: gratitude. Gratitude for the courage of a woman who reminded me that goodness still existed in the world. Not from pain, but from overwhelming gratitude for this woman's moral courage. "Lucia, how did you know about the Zetra, the documents, all of it?" I asked, my voice still thick with disbelief. She paused before answering, her words trembling with memory. 3 days ago, I was cleaning Mr. Victor's office when I heard them talking. Her hands had shaken as she dusted his desk. Each word from Victor and Clara cut into her like a blade, the cold cruelty in their tone chilling her to the bone. They spoke of lives, my life, as though it were nothing more than a trivial item on a menu. They talked as if I wasn't even human, she whispered. As though I was invisible, not a person with ears and a heart, but just a piece of furniture moving quietly in the background. The sting of their contempt had scarred her more deeply than the plots she overheard. I inhaled deeply before speaking. "Lucia, I run 7 restaurants across Brooklyn. I'm opening a new one soon, but I don't need a manager who only balances books. I need someone who knows that kindness and integrity matter more than profit, someone who values people above power, and I want that person to be you." On the other end of the line, I heard her choke back a sob. Her breaths trembled, quick and sharp, echoing like heartbeats through the receiver. It wasn't just emotion, it was the sound of a soul finally recognized for its true worth. The ride back into Brooklyn was quiet, yet heavy with meaning. Beyond the car window, the city's amber lights stretched like fallen stars across the streets. Each brick building, each weathered corner, reminded me that justice was never built in gilded living rooms. It lived in ordinary people who still believed in what was right. When I returned home, I removed Victor's photo from the refrigerator door. My fingers lingered at the edges, memories flooding back the innocent smile of a child long gone. But the boy in the picture and the man I had faced were no longer the same. I didn't tear it apart. Instead, I placed it gently into a kitchen drawer, closing it softly like a door shutting on the past. Later, I opened my desk calendar, pen in hand. In bold strokes, I wrote, Lucia, 10 a.m. Monday. Beneath that, I added 2 simple words, new beginning. And as I looked at those words, I felt its darkness finally receding, making room for the light of a future reborn. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with honest late-night activity. Through the half-open window drifted the city's unpolished symphony bus horns groaning, street vendors calling into the darkness, and the rough laughter of workers just released from their shifts. This city was never quiet, never perfect, but it was real. No masks, no pretense. A place where survival was carved out with bare hands and resilient hearts. I lifted my gaze to the framed photo of Helen in the living room. If she were here, she would have smiled at Lucia's story. Helen had always believed that dignity outlasted any contract, that a courageous heart could transform even the smallest corner of the world. A sharp notification broke the stillness. My phone buzzed against the kitchen table, its glow cutting through the dim light. I picked it up and read slowly, each word anchoring me deeper. Both suspects have now been formally charged. It was from Detective Coleman. My grip tightened around the phone as my vision blurred not with sorrow, but with the weight of justice finally resting where it belonged. I moved through the kitchen, turning off the lights one by one. Darkness settled in, soft and embracing, as if the house itself was exhaling. Each step up the staircase felt like shedding a burden I had carried too long. For the first time in months, my body felt light. In my bedroom, Helen's perfume still lingered faintly from the old wardrobe. I reached out and touched her worn scarf, and memories unfolded: warm dinners, gentle counsel, her quiet strength. Though she was gone, she remained beside me, a steady flame against the dark. I lay down, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself, real love is not merely sweet promises whispered in the light. It is the courage to protect the vulnerable, even when the harm comes from within one's own bloodline. That was Helen's legacy, and it is the creed I will carry forward, for as long as I breathe. Because family is the most precious thing we have, but respect and truth is the foundation of every bond. If this story touched you and reminded you that true family is built on respect and courage, please support by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment with your thoughts. We'd love to hear how this message resonated with you.